Welcome to the Module 4 commentary video, RIM Policies and Procedures for LIS 886. Please take a moment to adjust your video and sound settings for optimal viewing quality. If you encounter any difficulties viewing this video, please contact me as soon as possible. Prior to viewing this video for Module 4, please read pages 67 to 95 in the Kahn-Blair text. Also, please read the handout on Canvas called BYOD Businesses Still Lacking Effective Security Policies by Nathan Eddy. Directions on where to locate the handout will be available to you in your Module 4 to-do list, which is also posted on Canvas. Alright, this week we will venture into the weeds a bit more with RIM and discuss the importance of effective policies and procedures. While the words policies and procedures aren't always met with the greatest level of enthusiasm, however, I think they're fun, I cannot underscore enough the importance of these two concepts in the greater scheme of RIM activities. Effective policies and procedures, P&Ps as you'll hear me talk about them throughout the video, can help prevent data breaches, ensure victory in litigation, and also help improve or solidify the reputation of your organization in the public eye. In other words, RIM P&Ps cover so many vital areas that I wanted to make sure you were acutely aware of their importance in the grand scheme of things. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. And just as a sidebar, this is going to be a much lighter commentary video this week compared to the other ones, so this won't take too long. Just sit back and enjoy. Okay, so it should come as no surprise by Module 4 that I would spend probably the first few minutes of the commentary bringing the definitions of policies and procedures to life. Kahn and Blair do a great job of effectively capturing the spirit of these two RIM twins, as I call them, but let me just call to the forefront a few important elements. First, policies and procedures are two-tiered and provide a set of directives and guidelines. Policies are truly high-level position in statements and really should cover the actions of the entire organization or at least a major subset of the big picture. Procedures are actionable in that they take policies and break them down into digestible chunks for employees to enact. If you hand an employee a RIM policy and expect them to interpret it perfectly and effectively execute the requirements without procedures, you're in for a world of hurt. In other words, these two concepts go hand in hand. Make sure you as the RIM professional, no matter what anyone tells you, make sure that you don't have one without the other. Every policy and procedure will look a bit different when you compare the language across peer groups. In other words, no two universities, hospitals, libraries, or governmental agencies will have the exact same verbiage when it comes to policies and procedures. Some will be written better than others, and as you've read in the text and the article, some are grossly inadequate or not specific enough. Heck, you may even find policies and procedures which are so specific they become myopic in nature and too cumbersome to ever be implemented effectively. Although, when you take a step back, most experts agree that effective policies and procedures disseminate corporate expectations in a clear language which can be understood by all, which the policy is intended to cover. Also, effective policies and procedures are not owned by a person, meaning just because a CEO, a vice president, a director, or somebody like that transitions doesn't mean the policy or procedure dies when the person leaves, or they become ineffective for that matter. Always beware of policies and procedures which are attached to a single person. Kahn and Blair discuss in depth the standard policies and procedures which effective RIM organizations typically have on their books. One of the most important documents every organization should have is a high-level RIM policy. This document does not have to be granular in nature, but it needs to capture the essence of why RIM is important for the organization. Next, every organization needs to have a working set of retention rules, ideally a published records retention schedule. This schedule needs to be updated, available, and easy to translate for all employees. Next, each organization needs to have an electronic records management policy. Kahn and Blair state that this policy can be rolled up into that higher level RIM policy, or if necessary, stand alone by itself. Regardless, some mention of electronic records needs to be present at your organization. Finally, each organization needs to have an effective records hold policy. If you remember back to the previous commentary videos, there needs to be a set of steps in place to protect the organization in the unlikely event of litigation. Like the other three documents, the records/legal hold policy needs to be available and easily translatable in every program unit. Get to know these fabulous 4 documents, as I call them, and be sure you understand their importance in the grand scheme of records and information management. As you read in the Con Blair book and also in Eddie's article, the internet and case law books are littered with organizations which either ignore the concept of the fabulous 4 documents or set them in motion a tad bit doughy in the middle, to use a baking term, for example. On your screen is a list of common pitfalls which may lead to trouble with P&Ps. First, an organization might not even have RIM policies and procedures. If that's your organization, stop everything you're doing and make it a top priority to get them established and fast. Next, organizations sometimes don't have in place effective management guidance or system provisions. In other words, the policies might exist, but there's no one supporting them or enforcing them. Or the policies might exist, but for example, the document management system you use at the firm may have no technological capabilities available to, for example, delete records or put them on legal hold. Again, great policy in theory, but not in execution. In some organizations, the concept of backup is a little skewed. For example, does your database backup tapes or phone records automatically recycle themselves every 30 days, like some organizations, but your records retention schedule says that you keep them for 6 years? Be sure you know the capabilities of your system and align them with your policies and procedures. In other words, don't take anything for granted. Finally, beware of those pesky departing employees. Most organizations are great with shiny new people because, well, let's be honest, they're new, we're excited about them, and glad to have them on board. So it's good, that most organizations make sure that manuals are read and that documents are signed at the beginning. However, when someone leaves, are their laptops all collected? Are their usernames shut down? And worst of worst, do you find that they're running off with your files? Be sure to have proper offboarding procedures in place to assure that a breach doesn't occur with a well-meaning person who's retiring, or maybe a disgruntled ex-employee who is hell-bent on taking your firm down. If you're not sure what these offboarding procedures are, or if they even exist, your human resources department and your IT department are great places to start to kind of get your head together. Not one department's responsible for all pieces, so you're going to want to make sure that that's a group meeting when you start to discuss those items. Alright, the stage has been set to understand policies and procedures. There's a lot more in the text for you to read that will really expound upon what I've been talking about, but I don't want to belabor this any further. I want to take a moment to explore some examples of effective, detailed policies and procedures in action so you have a sense of what some of these look like and maybe some of the wording around these. Okay, on the screen you can see a sample RIM policy at the macro level, aka the high level of the organization. While not exactly perfect in wording, this sample policy clearly spells out the other 3 documents of the Fabulous 4, which complete the greater RIM picture. This policy by itself doesn't take the execution to a granular level, but it does convey the importance of the RIM program and the expectations of those employees at the organization. From here, users can click on their respective URLs, which I've called out with arrows, to launch other documents which will, in essence, fill in the blanks for them. The text of this policy was fused together from other institutions, best ARMA practices, and the guidance from our legal department. As you can see, this comes from my organization, and really we've used it as a benchmark to make sure that people are following the RIM policy, obviously, but we've had other institutions take pieces of this and spin them off to meet their own organizational needs. So as you can tell, this is just one example of a set of macro RIM policies that you may want to have in place. Now, getting a little bit more specific, if a user drills down, for example, into our information security policy, which was one of the links off of that previous slide that you saw, they will find just one of several lists which clearly spell out, like in this example, the covered list of data at the institution. Obviously, the world and technology change at almost a minute-by-minute pace, so this list is not stationary and it's constantly being updated. However, it's not just enough to tell employees to simply not disclose covered data. In this example, an administrative assistant or maybe a new employee could easily look down the list and find which data elements apply to his or own line of work. So it's very important to not only have the policy, but then start getting specific at some levels about what is covered in this instance. Your organization may also want to combine policies and procedures into the same document depending on the size of the policy or its scope. You can see here that with the Paul's legal hold policy, or at least a snippet of it, the policy is clearly spelled out in Section 6. Then, starting in Section 7, for example, and going on for several pages, our General Counsel's office, which is our legal office, clearly spells out step by step the expectations of a program unit should we face litigation as a group. Having worked with folks in other industries such as government, medical, and even accounting, each one of their own companies has internal policies and procedures like this, and typically they're saying about the same thing. They're giving you expectations and then spelling out what needs to be done. Within each program unit, it might be necessary to further spell out and define policies and procedures into action-oriented lists. For example, this program unit at DePaul decided to take the overall RIM policy and clearly define for student workers exactly how to implement a procedure and be sure that it's in line with the overall records and information management policy. By following this exact specific list, employees within a program unit are aware of how each step of the process relates to the overall RIM policy and its importance. While not required as a gold standard, sometimes complex departments need a breakdown like what you see here on the slide to this level to understand the importance of this policy. You've probably heard the phrase, "I'm more of a visual person," right? Well, you as a RIM manager probably should get familiar with a software called Microsoft Visio. I've worked with program units to create visual representations of their procedures in the greater context of an organizational policy. By visually showing the distinct steps in a process across different stakeholder bodies, participants in this process can see how to effectively execute work visually in the context of a policy. Whether it's a list or a visual, make sure employees know how to break down the policy into manageable chunks. As a sidebar, you can order Microsoft Visio for your PC if you want through Dominican University. It's about $45. It's a very, very easy program to learn, and I have to say it's probably one of the most effective programs as a RIM program manager that I've used. And if you need any demonstrations on how to use it, or if you'd like me to demonstrate it for you should you choose to purchase it, please let me know. I'll be happy to give you any of the manuals or instruction materials that I've used in the past. So just know you can buy it through the Dominican University IT department. Just contact the help desk and let them know that you're interested in purchasing Visio. It won't be required for the course, by the way. I won't make you buy it. Okay, so I want to go into depth a little bit more about how you need to make sure that your technology at your organization is integrated with your policies and procedures. Right now, I work with a software called ImageNow, which is one of the document management systems that we'll talk about during the course of this class. Now, again, I've stated before, I don't endorse any particular program. I just like to speak to some of the capabilities that these software packages tend to have. Now, so for instance, if you have a legal hold policy that states that your documents need to go on hold if you're worried that, for instance, Todd's going to turn around and sue your company, you want to make sure that your document management system has the ability in the very top of the slide for an administrator to add on a legal hold. And then on the bottom of the slide, you want to make sure that the program units have the ability to go on here and add a legal hold, meaning that this couldn't be deleted from the system if that was issued, for example. So you'll want to make sure, as you can see here, that a user could pull up Todd's file, highlight the appropriate documents, and then hit that stop sign to make sure that everyone is blocked out from deleting. There's obviously very many things you can do with some of these systems, but if your technology does not have the ability to uphold your policies, then you've got a problem, and you need to either approach your IT department to see what workarounds can be integrated, or you may want to look at using a completely different system which aligns with your policies. Also, you'll want to make sure that your institution has some sort of policy review cycle, or for the example of us, we have a policy review group. So this is a standalone group that meets once a quarter to go over a certain amount of policies and procedures every 3 years or so. They come up due to make sure that they're still relevant, okay? And also, if a new policy or procedure needs to be introduced for the organization, this is the group that helps them manage that process, okay? So make sure as a RIM program manager that you know how often your policies need to be reviewed, and if they've never been reviewed, you'll want to at least run them by your legal counsel to make sure that they're okay with the verbiage and that nothing's out of date. But ideally, you want to make sure that your institution has some sort of review group to look at the policies that may impact all of the different areas within your organization. If you want more information about how to establish a policy review group, or you're interested in terms of what is entailed in that in detail, please let me know. I'll be happy to share that information with you. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap up this commentary presentation by me giving you a final slide of the very least that I feel you need to know as a RIM program manager when it comes to P&Ps. First of all, make sure that you have established policies. You're going to want to go back to, again, those fabulous 4 to make sure that you at least have those bases covered. Make sure you're consistent with your formatting of the policies, that your language is very clear, and that it's being at least reviewed by your compliance/legal folks to make sure that it's possible and that you're covering yourself from that end. Make sure once you have policies that you effectively manage and establish procedures to the extent necessary. You may decide to go all the way down to granular pictures of things, or you may just have a simple list. Each organization is going to do it differently, so make sure you use the appropriate means to accomplish what you have to have at your organization. Then make sure that you're constantly reviewing at an appropriate cycle, whether that's once a quarter, once a year, once every 3 years, your policies and procedures, and you're keeping them up to date. Also, you'll want to have in place some sort of compliance procedure at your organization to ensure that these policies are being followed. Maybe it's you going out and meeting with folks in program units every year, or you work in tandem with your internal audit department or your compliance department. Whatever it is, you can't have policies and procedures in place and then not be sure if they're being followed. So make sure you're closing the loop when you do these sort of things. And that concludes the commentary video for Module 4, RIM Policies and Procedures. As always, if you have any questions, need anything clarified, or would like to speak with me further in depth about some of these concepts, please do not hesitate to contact me through Canvas or shoot me an email. Have a great week.